My name is Dr. Emily Hartman. I'm 37 years old, and I'm an intensivist at St. Joseph Medical Center in Tacoma, Washington. I've always been a skeptic. I grew up in a family of engineers and scientists, where everything needed proof, evidence, logic. Faith was seen as something almost childish. It's not that we were bad or cold people, just that we were used to trusting what our eyes could see and our hands could touch. I graduated from Harvard, did my residency in Seattle, and then chose Tacoma because I wanted a bit of peace without straying too far from the adrenaline of the ICU. My days were split between saving lives and delivering bad news. It was an intense routine, but I loved what I did, or so I thought, until the day everything turned upside down. It was March 15, 2022, a Tuesday like any other. We had 3 patients intubated and a complicated case of septicemia. I'd been on an 18-hour shift when I started feeling a sharp pain in my chest. At first, I thought it was anxiety or stress. I took a deep breath, had some coffee, and kept going. But the pain didn't stop. In minutes, it radiated to my left arm and my vision became blurry. I tried to call for someone, but my voice wouldn't come out. My legs gave way. The floor came up to meet me before I even realized what was happening. I woke up in flashes. I heard distant voices. Someone calling my name, pressure on my chest, someone yelling, "Shock now." Then, silence. A silence that wasn't an absence of sound, but a dense, almost living presence. That's when I noticed something absurd. I was outside my body. This isn't a metaphor. I saw my body lying on the break room floor. I saw the nurses running. I saw the desperation in the eyes of the resident who was with me. But I was above, floating. I felt a lightness impossible to describe. No pain, no fear, just consciousness. My first thought was, this isn't real. I'm dreaming. It's cerebral hypoxia. But the more time passed, if there was time, the clearer it became that this was no creation of my mind. I saw details I could never see from that angle. The paramedic's crooked badge, the wedding ring that had fallen on the floor beside my hand, the tear running down the face of a nurse who never showed emotion. I saw them, and I felt them. It was as if I could touch their emotions. The fear, the urgency, the hope. But the strangest thing came when I tried to look at myself. My body was there, but it seemed less real, as if the true me was finally waking up, and that fallen figure was just a suit I used to wear. And then, a light formed behind me. It wasn't a blinding light. It was welcoming, like a forgotten home. A voice, without words, just a vibration, called to me, and I went. In that moment, my old life ceased to matter. I wasn't Dr. Hartman, doctor, skeptic, daughter of scientists. I was something greater, something eternal. But little did I know that what was to come wasn't a spiritual reunion, but a frightening revelation that still keeps me up at night. When I moved toward that light, I didn't walk with my feet. It was more like being sucked into a magnetic field of pure love. Everything around me disappeared. The hospital room, the sounds of the machines, the shouts, everything became an indistinct backdrop. It was as if I were crossing the fabric of reality. The sensation was contradictory. At the same time, I felt welcomed. I also felt that something extremely important was about to happen. It wasn't just a going home experience. There was a purpose there. The first thing I noticed upon crossing into the light was the absolute silence. But not an empty silence. It was full of meaning, full of answers I didn't know I was looking for. Every particle seemed to contain a forgotten memory, as if that place knew me better than I knew myself. And, in a way, it did. I began to perceive shapes around me. Not people exactly, but presences. They shone in colors that don't exist here on Earth. It was a palette of colors I can't describe, but it touched me directly in my soul. And each color had emotion. One made me feel forgiveness. Another flooded me with a childlike joy. Still another made me cry without pain, a cry of healing. That's when one presence stood out from the others. It had no face, no name, but I recognized it. It was like reuniting with the oldest love that exists. A part of me screamed, "Mother!" But it wasn't my biological mother. It was something greater. It was a source, a consciousness, perhaps what some call God, and it communicated without words, only through direct vibrations to my being. The first thing this presence transmitted to me was, "You are not yet finished." But before I could ask, finished with what? Something around me changed. Everything went dark, not as if light were missing, but as if I had been ripped from that vibrational plane and placed in another. I started seeing images, fast, intense, like a sped-up movie. I saw cities, I saw crowds, I saw leaders of countries whose faces I vaguely recognized. Some were on podiums, others in meeting rooms. And then I saw fire. I saw a world map splitting into red lines. I saw hands pressing buttons. I saw the sky being torn by missiles. I saw children running through rubble. I saw flags burning. But, above all, I saw political desperation. And most terrifyingly, I realized that none of those images were symbolic. They were real. They were going to happen. The world isn't listening. The presence told me, now with words formed inside my mind, "And you will need to remember." I felt an immense cold, as if I had been plunged into ice. Remember what? I thought. The seeds of the future. And who won't survive? In that instant, I saw the faces of world leaders. And most shockingly, some of them were dead in scenes of attacks, others by poisoning, others in revolts. I saw their eyes closing. I saw their names being announced on global news. I wanted to scream. I wanted to unsee it. I wanted to return to the peace. But something held me there, trapped in that sequence of visions. I felt that it was inevitable, but not unchangeable. And then, before I could process what it all meant, I heard a phrase that burned inside me. Free will is a taut rope, and it's about to snap. The light around me began to vibrate more intensely. I felt like I was being pushed back, as if that dimension knew I had seen what I needed to see. And what's more, that I now had a mission. The mission to tell, to warn, to remember. Returning to my body was, in a way, more painful than leaving it. The last image I saw before falling back into that heavy, limited body was a face that still haunts me today. A young-looking man, wearing a dark uniform. He was on a podium, speaking with fervor. Behind him, a crowd was cheering him on with a mix of fear and adoration. Something about him made me feel spiritually nauseous. And before I could understand who he was or what it represented, I was pulled back. There was no smooth transition. It was a brutal shock. I felt as if I had been thrown against a concrete wall. The first sound I heard was a heart monitor alarm, then hurried, confused voices. My eyes were closed, but the physical world was already suffocating me again. I tried to open my eyes, but they were too heavy. Still, I heard everything. She's coming back. Pressure is stabilizing. My God, she's back. The pain in my chest came like a blade, and along with it, an almost unbearable urge to cry. Not from the physical pain, but from everything I had left behind, from the loss of that place of light, and even more, from the vivid memory of what I had seen. When I managed to open my eyes, the face of a nurse, Lindsay, was inches from mine. She smiled, but her eyes were red. "Dr. Hartman, you gave us quite a scare." But I didn't answer. I just looked at the ceiling, trying to reconnect with that vibration I had felt on the other side. But it was already far away, very far away. In the following days, while recovering in the hospital, I tried to maintain my rationality. They said I had suffered a sudden arrhythmia, likely aggravated by stress and exhaustion. My tests were normal, miraculously normal. It was a brief arrest, they said, less than 3 minutes. But for me, it was years of consciousness, years of revelations, years of images I couldn't forget. I tried talking to a psychiatrist colleague. He was respectful, but attributed everything to a neurological hallucination. I tried to leave it at that, but the images didn't stop, and most frighteningly, they came in my dreams, with details, with dates. I saw newspaper headlines. I saw one that said, "European leader dies in attack during peace conference." I saw another, "Collapse in international negotiations raises tension in the East." And the worst, I saw the word irreversible being said by someone on a TV news channel, someone who doesn't even exist in current world politics. I would wake up sweating, crying, trembling, as if I were reliving the trauma of a war that hadn't even started yet. That's when I decided to do something I never thought I would. I started writing. I bought an old hardcover notebook and wrote everything down, in order, with dates, names, symbols. I thought that maybe if I documented everything, I could at least get it out of me, like an exorcism. But writing only increased the anguish, because as I put it on paper, I noticed a pattern, an invisible thread that connected all the images, all the faces, all the events. And this pattern pointed to only one thing. We are on the brink of a global rupture, and no one is seeing it. At that point, I still didn't know what to do with this gift or burden I had received. But something inside me screamed that staying silent was no longer an option. What started as an impulse to write turned into a compulsion. I couldn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, more images came. It was as if I had connected to a stream of cosmic information, something that didn't come from my mind, but passed through it. At first, I thought it was just a defense mechanism, a brain trying to make sense of a near-death experience. But it was more than that, because the visions continued even when I was awake. I could be drinking coffee, and suddenly I would feel a pressure in the center of my forehead, a slight dizziness, and then a scene would appear, clear, naked, raw, in real time. A general signing a document, a flag being lowered from a mast, an explosion in an underground location that no one knew existed. I started to be afraid of myself. I avoided talking to colleagues, even the closest ones. There were already doctors whispering about my episode. Some were worried, others just curious. But everyone expected me to go back to being the Emily Hartman from before. Only she didn't exist anymore. That woman had died. Literally. Gradually, the visions began to be accompanied by internal voices. They weren't hallucinations in the clinical sense. I didn't hear real sounds, but messages that sprouted from the back of my mind like thoughts that weren't mine. The East will move before the West is ready. 3 will die so that 1 may rise. The skies will close in July. These phrases hammered in my head like spiritual enigmas, and along with them came feelings, anguish, urgency, sorrow. It was as if I felt the suffering of millions before it even happened. I started rereading my own writings in search of logic, of some kind of prophetic structure. And to my horror, it existed. A cycle, a sequence of events that began with a diplomatic crisis between 2 neighboring countries, something that, at the time, seemed unlikely, and ended with a global war involving superpowers. And within this cycle, there were specific names. I saw the face of a globally known president being led into an armored car with injuries on his face. I saw another, an Asian leader, looking at a red screen with teary eyes while the world around him was crumbling. I saw secret meetings, broken pacts. I saw the collapse of what seemed to be an international alliance. I'm not authorized, by myself, to say the names. Not yet. I don't even know if I'll ever have the courage, but I would recognize all those faces if I saw them again. The most terrifying thing, however, wasn't the content of the visions, but the final message that came days later. You have until the 12th cycle. I didn't know what that meant, but something in me understood. Time was running out. It was as if I had been given a limited number of chances to do something, to speak, to warn, to prevent. But how? Who would listen to me? I started considering the idea of releasing everything, of recording a video, of exposing myself, but my reputation, my career, the fear, it all paralyzed me. I was a doctor, a scientist, respected, who would believe that I, of all people, was having prophetic visions after a cardiac arrest. And at the same time, another voice inside me, softer, wiser, said, "If you don't speak, others will perish in silence." It was that night, after another vision involving fleeing leaders, that I decided, I will tell my story, all of it, even if no one believes me, even if I lose everything, because what I saw wasn't a dream. It was a warning, and it burns inside me like a fire I can't put out. I made the decision to record my first video in the early morning of April 9th, 2022. I was sitting on the floor of my room, still in my pajamas, with the notebook open beside me and my hands shaking. I turned on my cell phone and started talking. At first, just to myself, with no intention of posting. I just needed to get it out. In the video, my voice came out choked. My name is Dr. Emily Hartman. I'm an intensivist in Tacoma, Washington, and what I'm about to tell you may sound like madness, like a delusion, but it's real. I couldn't get much further in the first recording. I cried in the middle of it. I deleted it. I recorded it again and again. It took 7 attempts to give an account without breaking down. But when I finished, I didn't have the courage to post it. The video was saved on my phone for days, like a silent time bomb. Meanwhile, the visions returned with more intensity. They no longer came only when I slept or meditated. Now, they appeared in my reflection in the mirror, in out-of-sync TV static, even in other people's conversations that suddenly triggered some memory of that other dimension. One day, as I entered the hospital cafeteria, I heard a metallic sound from the wall clock. It was broken, stopped at 11:11. That gave me a dizzy spell. A strange warmth ran through my body. I sat down forcefully. That night, at home, I opened the notebook and noticed a bizarre pattern. Many of the visions involved the number 11. 11 planes, 11 days, 11 countries, 11 men in a command room. I started underlining everything. And over time, I realized that it was a repetitive cycle, like a temporal code. And then, I remembered the phrase I had heard in the out-of-body experience. You have until the 12th cycle. If 11 was the number of the revelations, 12 might be the breaking point, the fall, the final event. That same week, I had one of the most disturbing visions of all. I was brushing my teeth when, suddenly, everything around me became opaque. The light changed, the mirror darkened, and inside, I saw a scene as clear as a hologram. A man at a large oval table, surrounded by advisors. They were deciding the fate of millions. And then, he said something that froze my spine. If we lose the East, we will press the button. There will be no alternative. It took my breath away. I vomited right there in the bathroom. Later, trying to sleep, I heard the vibration of the presence again. It didn't manifest with the same force as before, but it was still with me. You are not the only one. That's what they told me. The phrase kept echoing. Was it possible that other people had gone through similar experiences? Other messengers, perhaps? Other survivors of the same light? Moved by this, I went into online NDE forums. I read hundreds of accounts. Most talked about peace, reunions, eternal love, but hidden among so many testimonies, I found some strange ones like mine, people who saw the future, who came back with messages about catastrophes, who talked about colliding timelines. These people were also silent, afraid of sounding crazy. Some were institutionalized. Others disappeared from social media. I felt a chill in my soul, because that confirmed my greatest fear. There is a bigger plan unfolding, and it is being watched. The next morning, I decided I can't stay silent, but before any public release, I needed to find others like me. I needed to understand what this clock was and why I was chosen to remember it. It was on a sleepless night that I found his name. I was browsing an international forum on near-death experiences when I read a comment left in a buried discussion from almost 3 years ago. The user signed off only as 012. The message was short, but it froze me inside. I saw the same things. The man with the button, the flags falling. The code is the same, 1112. If you remember, look for the spectral fringe. We are not alone. It was the first time I had seen someone else mention the Quaidim code, as I had written it in my notebook. The number 11, the cycle, the figure of the man about to make a catastrophic decision. I desperately searched for anything related to this spectral fringe, but the results were minimal. I only found an inactive domain, a link to a deleted blog, and a series of blurry images hosted on Russian servers. But in one of the images, There was something familiar. The symbol I had seen in one of the visions, a double spiral crossed by a vertical line. It was like an antenna crossing an energy field. What did that mean? I spent the following nights immersed in more research until an anonymous email appeared in my inbox. No title, no identifiable sender, just a single line of text in the body of the message. Dr. Hartman, be careful, they know you saw. My blood ran cold. Minutes later, my phone froze. The screen went black for 5 seconds. And when it came back, there was a new video recorded in my gallery. A video I hadn't made. It was my own phone's front camera, showing me sleeping in bed for exactly 1 minute and 11 seconds. I can't explain how that got there, but I understood immediately. They were watching me. My first reaction was panic. I ran to the kitchen, broke the phone, and took out the battery. Then I turned off the Wi-Fi at home, taped over cameras. Was I paranoid? Yes, but necessary. In the days that followed, I started to feel physical presences following me. Black cars parked for hours in front of my apartment building. A man in a trench coat who entered the cafe I used to go to looked directly at me and left without ordering anything. Even my supervisor at the hospital started acting strangely, with too many questions, a sudden interest in my mental health. That's when I realized my experience wasn't just spiritual. It had broken some barrier that touched an underground layer of reality, something that involved powerful people, governments, agencies, or even secret organizations. I remembered the warning, the future has already begun to react. And then I understood. Some of the forces trying to prevent the collapse are not divine. They are human, people who know what's coming, who may have created ways to spy on those who, like me, gained access to the visions. I started having dreams of underground facilities, filled with panels and cables. I saw people connected to machines, as if they were trying to induce the type of experience I had, forcing access to the other side. I also saw secret files being shredded, codes being entered into computers while sirens blared. It was as if a hidden war was already underway, invisible to most people, but I could see it. And upon realizing this, a question tormented me. Did I come back by choice, or because I was brought back to be used? On the night of April 22nd, 2022, I woke up at 3:11 a.m. with a sharp ringing in my ears. It wasn't an external noise, it was a frequency, thin and continuous, that seemed to come from inside my skull. And just below it, something more. A voice, almost imperceptible, hidden like a whisper beneath the noise. I staggered out of bed and went to my office. I turned on the audio recorder I used to document the visions and held the microphone close to my ear. The sound didn't play in the room. Only I could hear it. I recorded for 3 minutes, and the next day, I ran the file through spectrogram software, a tool that analyzes sound frequencies at levels the human ear can't perceive. What appeared on the screen made me tremble. There were words, fragmented, cut, but clearly structured. Below the 18 kHz line, patterns emerged that formed a phrase, "You are inside them." I spent the entire day trying to understand it. Who are they? And what does being inside mean? Was it a reference to the system, to some network, to some spiritual connection with something I still don't understand? And it was on that same day that I received a mysterious package. No sender, no postal stamp. It was at the door of my apartment when I got back from the hospital. Inside the small cardboard box, there was only an old radio from the 60s and a folded note. Tune in at 1:12 a.m. once. Just once. The radio worked. It was a tube model, heavy and smelling of old wood. At night, I sat on the living room floor, closed the windows, turned off all the lights, and waited. When the clock struck 1:12, I slowly turned the tuning knob. At first, I only heard static. Then, a sequence of rhythmic sounds, like digital beats. And then, a female voice came through the channel. But it wasn't talking to me. It was as if I were listening to a private broadcast, in a language that sounded human yet alien, like Hebrew mixed with Russian, with precise pauses and intonations. But suddenly, in the middle of the broadcast, something changed. The voice stopped, and a clear message in English appeared, as if speaking directly to my subconscious. Emily, the cycles are accelerating. What you saw is only the surface. My eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from a strange feeling of being guided, as if a forgotten part of me knew exactly what to do, even though my mind was resisting. The next morning, when I went to look for the radio, it wasn't there anymore. I searched the whole house. Nothing. No trace of the package, the note, the device, as if it had never existed. But the audio I recorded was saved, and when I analyzed the spectrogram again, a new phrase emerged, embedded at another point in the file. You are the channel, not the end. That's when I began to understand. My function wasn't to predict the future. It was to open the way for it. It was to decode, connect, warn. Whatever was trying to communicate with me came from a place where time and space don't work like they do here. But the message was clear. The events are approaching, and time is being compressed. I was, in some way, part of the gear, and maybe the last link before the collapse. After the episode with the radio, something in me changed. It wasn't just spiritual. It was as if my own mental frequency had been adjusted. I began to notice details in the physical world that had previously gone unnoticed. Small distortions, moments when the air seemed to vibrate, as if reality were rearranging itself before my eyes. It was during one of these distortions that I had my clearest vision yet. I was sitting on a bench in Wright Park on a cold, gray, late afternoon. There were children playing in the distance, the sound of light footsteps on the gravel sidewalk, everything normal. But for a second, the sky became static. The leaves froze in the air. Time stopped. And the next instant, I was pulled back into the light. But this time, it wasn't like before. It wasn't a detachment from the body, but a projection, a sudden opening of the veil between worlds. I was standing in a completely white space, and before me, the presence returned. The same one that had welcomed me the first time. But now, it wasn't alone. There were 12 beings around it, aligned like a council. They had no faces, but each one exuded a distinct color and vibration. I knew, without knowing how, that they were guardians of some higher order, and that they were all watching me intently. Then, a voice echoed inside me, coming from the central presence. You have been activated. I felt my body vibrate, as if every cell were being reprogrammed. You asked to forget, but now you need to remember. My heart raced. Remember what? At that moment, an image appeared between us, a circle divided into 4 parts, each quadrant representing an era. At the bottom, there were symbols that looked like ancient civilizations. One of them was identical to the one I had seen on the vanished radio. Another, I vaguely recognized from a book I read in my teens about Sumerian civilizations. The Earth has entered the threshold. A new cycle is in transition, and there are forces trying to prevent this birth. The words cut through me like blades. And then, the council showed me scenes of humanity itself. I saw wars that had already happened. I saw others that hadn't yet occurred. But what impacted me most was seeing what happens behind the spiritual scenes during these events. I saw dark beings feeding on human fear, as if pain were a dimensional fuel. These beings weren't demons in the religious sense. They were conscious forms that parasitize chaos, and they were actively working to stimulate future conflicts, meddling in the emotions of world leaders, planting ideas, distorting truths. I clearly saw one of them whispering words of war into the ear of a powerful man, and that man was one of the leaders I had already seen die. That's when I understood the extent of my role. You are not here to prevent the events. You are here to prevent the domination. The phrase cut me to the core, because it meant that perhaps the war was inevitable, but that the level of destruction, of spiritual loss, could be reduced if the right consciousnesses were awakened in time. Before being returned to the park, I heard one more thing. Your message will reach those who also forgot, and when they remember, the frequency will amplify. I returned to the bench with a tear running down my face and my heart on fire. The children were still playing. The sky had returned to normal, but inside me, everything had changed. The war is approaching. But collective consciousness may be the true battlefield, and I now knew I'm not fighting against weapons. I'm fighting for souls. At the end of April, after so many visions, coded messages, and spiritual signs, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. The truth was like a scream inside my chest, and ignoring it was no longer an option. I was going to speak. I chose the following Sunday, May 1st, 2022. I prepared everything in silence with my new cell phone, a simple tripod and a white sheet behind me. I wore my lab coat, not out of vanity, but so people would understand that I was from the rational world, that my background, my profession, my history, all of it didn't match the narrative I was about to tell. At 11:11 a.m., I started recording. My name is Dr. Emily Hartman. I'm an intensivist in Washington State, and a few weeks ago, I suffered a cardiac arrest. During that event, I experienced something that goes beyond science, something that changed my perception of reality, and that may change yours too. I told everything, from the first moments outside my body to the visions. I spoke of the messages, the dates, the 1112 code, the spiritual presence, the council, the invisible threat, the frequency. I censored the names of the world leaders I saw, but left the descriptions intact as a way to protect myself and to warn without accusing. Finally, I made a request. If anyone, anywhere in the world, has gone through something similar, please get in touch, because I know I am not alone. I posted the video on a newly created YouTube channel. No promotion, no announcements. I just let it exist. A seed cast into the void. In the first hour, almost no views. In the second, a few comments, mostly from skeptics, laughing, calling me delusional. But then, something strange happened. Around 4 p.m., I received an email. The sender was E12122 Orla, net. No text, no title, just an encrypted attachment with the Veil extension. I ignored it. Half an hour later, another email. This time, the subject was, "You unlocked the first cycle." The body of the email read, "The frequency has increased. They are listening. Others are waking up. Continue." Goosebumps ran down my spine. At that same moment, I opened YouTube. The video had 42,000 views. In less than 5 hours, the comments were multiplying. Some were mocking, but others weren't. People saying they had identical dreams to mine. People who had never seen me, from different countries, describing the same spiral of light, the same vibrational voice, the same map of conflicts. One user wrote, "I'm from Istanbul. In February, I dreamed of a man on a podium saying, 'If we lose the East, we will press the button.' I thought I was crazy. Until I heard you repeat the same words." Another commented, "I'm a former soldier. The symbol you drew in the video, it's in confidential documents I saw over 10 years ago. No one should know about this." I was paralyzed in front of the screen. In a few hours, an invisible network was forming, as if multiple disconnected minds were being realigned by the same spiritual source. But it wasn't all light. I started receiving threats, comments saying I should keep quiet if I knew what's best for me, fake profiles accusing me of making up stories for profit, or even of being part of a psychological operation by some government agency. The next morning, when I left the house, I noticed that all 4 of my car tires were flat, and on the body, written in something that looked like soot, "The frequency does not forgive." I don't know if it was a prank or a real warning, but it only confirmed one thing. I was heard, and now I am being watched. What started as a near-death experience became a silent war for the truth, and Cycle 12 was approaching. It was the early morning of May 12, 2022. I woke up with a sharp pain in the back of my neck, as if an electric current were passing through my spine. I sat up in bed, breathless. The room plunged into absolute silence, but it wasn't a common silence. It was the same dense, living silence I felt before leaving my body for the first time. I knew something was about to happen. At the exact moment I looked at the clock, 12:12. An intense light filled the room, not from lamps or from the street. It was an internal light, coming from me, passing through me, waking me up. I was taken over by a presence even stronger than the other times, and without leaving the spot, I was transported again to the white space where the spiritual council awaited me. But this time, they were not alone. Behind them, as if emerging from an even deeper dimension, figures appeared that shone in hues the human mind cannot name. Their bodies were like living constellations, and from them emanated an indescribable vibration. Origin, time, promise, end. The presence that had spoken to me before stepped forward, and this time its communication was different, more direct, clearer. You are in the cycle of the threshold. The image that appeared before me was devastating. A vast continent in flames, leaders in flight, the global internet collapsing, satellites falling like dead stars, multitudes marching, starving, desperate. You saw all this because you took part in it before. I felt my heart shatter. Before? What do you mean? Then the revelation came like a blade of light. This is not the first time. In another life, in another cycle of humanity, I had already lived all of that, and I failed. I stayed silent. I was silenced. Or worse, I was complicit in the lie. At that time, I did not have the courage to warn. The consequences were catastrophic. The spiritual collapse of Earth deepened, and the veil between the worlds tore completely, giving irreversible passage to entities that feed on fear and destruction. Now, in this new cycle, I returned, not to change everything, but to try to awaken those who can still hear. You will not save the entire planet, but every consciousness that rises pushes back the darkness of the collective. It was then that I understood. The war to come is inevitable on the physical plane, but the decisive battle will take place within consciousness, in those who choose compassion over fear, in those who resist emotional manipulation, in those who know that, even in the midst of collapse, it is still possible to sustain the light. The presence then showed me my videos, being watched by a young girl in rural India, by a teacher in Argentina, by a nun in Poland. People awakening, crying, remembering, and somehow reconnecting with the same field of consciousness that had called me back to life. The message has been delivered. Now, choose, depart, or continue. The question tore me apart. I could go, return to peace, to light, to the home that dwells beyond time, or remain here on this wounded earth, facing chaos, being ridiculed, hunted, forgotten. But my heart, no longer mine, answered, I stay. And with that, I awoke, lying on the floor of the room, a tear drying at the corner of my eye, my arms spread like wings. It was morning, and the sun shone as if it knew. Cycle 12 had begun, and I was ready to be the channel, even if no one else believed, because now I remembered everything.